Hello and welcome to Behind the Locked Door. Doors? I forget if we're plural or not.
I don't remember.
Yeah, it's fine. A very professional podcast where we sometimes have no updates at all. uh, I am Scott Paladin, and I am working on a scripted audio drama called It Takes a Wolf.
And I'm Jack. I'm working on S1E4, which is a spin-off of Unspeakable Distance. Also, I just checked, it is doors plural.
Doors. Okay, great.
Yeah. Now we know.
Okay, we'll make it. We'll have
really
to remember
put together
many
today.
Doors.
Also, no Sam. So.
Also, no Sam, and that's going to be the theme of this episode, which is that a lot of things happened, and we don't actually have any updates. So to start with mine, I was going to get a couple. I was hoping to get 1,000 words done. I have written 1,000 words.
Nice.
I have less finished work than when I started.
It's like that sometimes.
Yes, sometimes that is the case where I go in and I'm like, okay, the stuff that I have, I don't like. It's good. It's just not where I want to head.
Well,
so I went back to
Sometimes you don't know that until you write all 1,000 of those words, and then you go, oh, these were not the 1,000 words that I want to proceed with, but it was still an important exercise to have written them, I feel like.
It's absolutely part of the process. It's, you have to write, and then you go, oh no, let me go back to the blank page. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm restructuring some stuff in the plot, trying to figure out some broader things. Actually, I do have a subject I want to talk about later, but I also have a question I want to get your input on.
Okay.
But first, let's see if you have an update, Jack.
My update is that it has been like very dense recording sessions for Breathing Space this past couple of weeks. And the episode that I'm working on for that is almost completely recorded at this point.
Awesome.
So that's really most of what I've been spending my attention on. Plus, I'm a retail worker, and yesterday was Black Friday. So, you know.
Well, we're getting into that season where, free time is few and far between for a lot of us. So I spent like my entire Thanksgiving week was shot with cooking and family and all that stuff.
Yeah, totally. So, my in-laws were in town. It was a whole thing.
Yeah. So, and I know that Sam, when we were on last week, was saying mostly that he was going to be working on an audiobook. So I hope that he got that done.
Yeah, fingers crossed that happened.
Yeah. We're not on any deadlines here, so we can languish a little bit in the fact that we're not getting paid.
Yeah, we're not getting paid, and it's the holidays. Like stuff falls behind, generally speaking. I did finally clean my whole apartment.
That's nice.
That's a big win for me.
Yeah. As you may or may not be able to see in the video behind me, my office is a complete disaster right now. I have this next week off, and one of the things I'm going to be doing between trying to get other creative stuff done is just cleaning and organizing and like 3D printing little things to hang stuff on the wall. And
there you go. So. Well, yeah, to be clear, cleaning my apartment, I'm making quote marks in there right now, mostly means shoving everything unsightly into the office. So that's why the room behind me still looks like that, because everything from the rest of the apartment is here.
That is a completely valid way to clean, where you're just like, I'm going to take all of the things out of this room and put them in this other room. And then when I need that room to be clean, I'm going to take all of those things and I'm going to put them back in the first room.
But maybe in a better organizational way than they were before. Maybe, hopefully.
I was introduced recently to the idea of a doom pile, or something, which is literally didn't organize, only moved. Which I really like. I'm like, it's a thing I've been doing my entire life. And I'm like, okay, there's a giant pile of stuff here. I need the surface that pile of stuff is on.
Right.
I do not have the bandwidth to do anything with it. So it's all just going to go in a box. And that box is now called a doom box. And I will deal with it sometime.
Some other time. That's future me's problem. We're not worried about it right now.
Yeah. And and that may never happen. It's fine.
Yeah, that pile may just move from place to place until you die, and that's the way it is.
I actually do have I want an outside input from somebody who's somewhat familiar with this project.
Okay.
I was I've been, like I said, I went literally back to a blank page. Not quite a blank page. I kept my very first line, which I think is a good first line.
Okay.
And started again. And I was, for structural reasons, it would be kind of cool to give a little bit of backstory for the main character and sort of the setting, and maybe to describe an inciting incident that might then be relevant later. So to have a little bit of story time at the beginning.
Story time.
But I'm imagining this character alone in a room, And so that would mean the narrator would be telling the story. Like the character wouldn't be saying it aloud to someone.
Okay.
Which means that the very first scene of the very first episode, if I was to do that in that format, would be, I don't know, 5-10 minutes of just the first narrator talking. And then at some point we would get into the diegetic action of the in-universe things, and we'd start hearing our main character actually speak aloud. But I am worried that spending so much time with just the narrator before I introduce the concept that the narrator and the speaking voice are different might throw people. And I wanted to hear if you had any thoughts about that.
Okay, so what you're proposing is only the narrator voice, whoever is playing playing the narrator, speaking uninterrupted for 5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah, just to tell the story and give us some information.
Tell the story about where we're starting. And then your second actor playing the speaking aloud character voice speaks for the first time 10 minutes in.
Yeah.
And we're supposed to somehow connect like, this is the same person now speaking
exactly
aloud. Okay.
In the first version of the script, it was really quick. I had like one paragraph of stuff, and then it gets into the, a person walks into the office and we start talking.
Okay.
And I feel like that was quick enough that people would start to get the idea. And then once they're used to it, I don't feel like it'll be that bad.
No, it'll be like really clear as we go along, I'm sure. But I do feel like 5 to 10 minutes of monologuing in a different voice and then being asked to intuit, okay, now this other different separate human is speaking, but I am supposed to associate that voice with the character who was just monologuing at me for 10 minutes. That might be a rougher one to flag. I feel like there are probably ways to do it, but I don't know what they are that would still be like a clear read to the audience. But I bet it's possible.
It's the workaround that I was considering was if you put somebody in the room, if the person has a reason to be talking loud, then I can start using the interplay between these two voices and we can just start going back and forth pretty quickly. But the moment at the thing I'm thinking about is I don't know who that person would be right now. Sure. That's not how I had envisioned the scene. And so I'm going to have to kind of restructure that. But if you understand the worry of it, then I think you're not being reassuring about it. So
I have a thought, actually.
Yeah, please do.
Is this the type of setting where you could have your main character recording themselves, like speaking into some sort of recording device?
That's an excellent question. I think that technologically that would work. I can fudge things a little bit, and so that we could have tape recorders or something like that. That would be possible. I'm not sure that the main character is the kind of person to do that.
Who would make like an audio log or something?
Yeah. That being said, I wonder if I could. So I was thinking, have you seen the movie Lucky Number 11?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, then I cannot make the analogy there.
You can make it for the listeners. I just won't.
Yeah,
understand it.
There's a thing I think of as the Kansas City Shuffle, which is a thing from that movie, which is a kind of plot where it's a bit like a heist plot, a bit like a crime, a crime plot. Where there's big, there's baddies going around and stuff, and then you find out most of the way through the plot, like 45%, not 45, like 75% of the way through, you find out that a bunch of information about our main character, that this was all orchestrated by them, right?
Okay.
That this was all an elaborate setup, and that while the main character hasn't necessarily been truthful to the audience this whole time, that like backstory things that they said may be false and all that things, and that once you reveal that information, you're like, oh, okay, the entire plot of this makes sense. This whole big confusing mystery comes together from this one idea.
That's funny. Okay, so does this movie take place in Kansas City? Because I'm from Kansas City and I should watch it if that's the case.
It's in New York, actually. You should watch it. You'd love it.
Okay.
I know enough about your taste, Jack, that you'd love this movie.
Okay, great.
It is a super sharp script.
Okay.
Where you can tell the writer is having a lot of fun with the dialogue.
Okay.
And it's a pretty solid it has the taste of a heist movie, even though it isn't exactly a heist movie.
Okay.
What's his name? The main guy is really cute. Josh something.
I feel like my ass is being put on blast right now.
It's got Lucy Liu being absolutely adorable, and Josh
great.
Hartnett also being very cute.
Okay. I'm gonna write down the name of this movie. What's it called?
Yeah, it's called Lucky Number Slevin.
Slevin.
Yep, like the word seven, but with an S in there.
Okay.
Yeah. I know enough about your taste to say that you'd like this movie.
Okay, great.
But anyway, so that being said, it would be within the realm of possibility for this character to have an unseen co-conspirator, or a co-conspirator whose identity is not revealed early. And so possibly I could have them talking to that person and then just hide the identity of that person from the audience.
Well, yeah, conveniently, we're not going to see this person with our eyeballs. So
yes,
there can be another voice in the room, and we can just be sort of proceeding vibes unaffected with the knowledge that someone else is in the room, but we don't know who it is at this point in time.
Yeah. Or it could be there's options there. Also, the idea is if I'm using the speaking voice, then that voice can lie really easily to the audience. If the person says it aloud and it is not true, that feels a little different than if the narrator was to straight up lie to us.
Yes,
so that gives me some flexibility. Okay, so that sounds like it's worth doing to restructure things to make sure that I have that.
Or to do like some insertions between the narration you've already got planned.
Yeah, it was really interesting when I was starting to write this. I didn't realize how much the two voices were going to kind of argue with each other a little bit. Like they're not directly addressing, not addressing each other, but like the narrator will burst in and like make comments on the things that the character says aloud, which is really cool.
I love that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was not expecting to do that, but it's
fun. Have you played Disco Elysium, Scott?
I have played Disco Elysium, and this definitely has Disco Elysium vibes.
The energy is reminding me of that.
Yeah, it's 100%. Yeah. I did not engage with that game the way that I saw the rest of the culture, like the online community really go absolutely nuts for it. I like it. There's things I really like about it. It just something about it didn't strike me the same way.
That's fair.
But I can tell it's like technically super cool, and I really like it, and the world building. Like I have nothing but praise for it. I just didn't fall in love with it the same way.
That's totally valid. The way that the narrator is almost like sort of mocking or antagonistic toward the main character at times in that game is so fun and funny and good. And I feel like if you bring that energy to this project, everyone's going to go nuts. It's going to be so great.
Yeah. I'm aware of the parallels, and I'm interested in it.
Nice.
Okay. So I did have a topic that I set aside for us to talk about.
Okay. I want to hear the topic.
Which is talking about video games. Actually, are you familiar with the principle of making the first level last?
So no.
In game development, it is a commonly held piece of advice that if you make a video game, you shouldn't work on the first level at all until you've made the entire rest of the game, and then you should go back and make your first level, because 90% of all the people who play, the first level of a game is the only thing that everyone plays.
Right. Okay.
That they drop off, and so you want to put your best foot forward. You want to have the thing where you know the most and have the most experience and have all of your have figured everything out. You want to take the version of you that has done all of that work, and that's the one that should make the very first part of the game.
Got it.
So that people can then they get the best version of it. It also means that they're not starting off on like the worst version of the game that you started with when you didn't know anything.
Right.
No, you now work on and that makes it easier to flow into the next thing.
Okay. Sure.
And I think I linked it, but like looking at podcast numbers, I think the same thing might be true in podcasting, although I understand that makes for production reasons, that's a terrible piece of advice to give somebody.
Yeah, it's hard to.
It's so hard. But I was looking at
set that up.
We're gonna use Breathing Space as our example, but I'm gonna talk about my first episode, not the first episode.
Okay, sure.
Because I was number 2 in the production there, but like literally it goes like we lose from episode 1 to episode 2, we lost like 30% of all listeners. And then episode 2 to once you get to 2, people tend to stick around a little bit more, but by the time we've gotten 4 or 5 episodes down the rank, we've lost another 30% of the original total.
And I'm sure that's pretty standard.
Oh, and this is not special for us in any way. Mm-hmm. This is just an example of like the logarithmic drop off of what happens when people start new things. A bunch of them are just going to bounce off. But I'm thinking about that second episode, Rat Among Falcons, which was the first time I'd written anything seriously in like 4 or 5 years.
Wow.
It was my first time ever editing for like sound design. It was my first time ever directing, and it was the first time that I'd acted in over 10, 15 years.
Oh my God.
So, I had to be good at all of those things for that particular episode. That was one where I was wearing all the hats.
You were wearing
and I'm thinking
every
about it
hat
now,
possible, and it came out amazing. Like, that episode's great.
Yeah. But I think about it and I'm like, oh man, especially when I compare it to just the end of that season. There was an episode that was produced sort of out of production order as everything else, which was I Walk These Hills. Was kind of slotted in at the end for backstage reasons that don't matter. But because of that, I made that episode after the rest of season 1. And I look back myself at how much better a director I was, how much better at sound design I was. All these things, I'm like, oh, I wish I'd have been able to apply those skills to the first thing that people would hear. Like,
oh, sure.
It's sad to me that not sad, because Red Among Falcons is a really, really good episode that I love people to hear. But I wish I had all of that additional knowledge that I had learned from doing the rest of the season for the one that everybody was going to hear at episode 2.
That makes total sense.
And it's one of those things where I don't know how practical this advice would be for somebody trying to make a project like this. But it is something that I have been thinking about because, well, yeah, I'm looking at these numbers and I'm like, man, if you want to put your best foot forward, man, you really ought to. If you could possibly make the first episode last, you might really benefit from it.
Yeah, like literally just start with the second installment, record everything, and then go back and hit the first one.
Yeah. And I actually have given a version of this advice. It's even worse. I gave worse advice to a bunch of people. And I still actually stand by this advice for other kinds of podcasts, which is, so it's their first time ever making a podcast. Make 10 episodes, literally completely all the way through. Get them ready to release, fully edited, listen to them, show them to people, but don't put them on the feed. Then your 11th episode is the first one that you release.
Yeah. That's probably really good advice.
I again, having started on other projects and stuff like this in the past, you learn so much in those first 10 hours of production. First 10 hours that you make, you learn so much. I can't imagine being the kind of newbie who could stand to do that. No, totally. You want to put it out and have the excitement and all that stuff.
That's very difficult advice to follow, but I think it's probably very valuable as well.
Yeah. Just like, I want you to do a bunch of work and then throw it away.
And be like, this was all practice for the actual work that was coming later.
And it's not even like, oh, you're a newbie. You don't know anything. It's literally like almost every project is like learning how to do it over again a little bit. There's all bunch of stuff. I mean, like I've done how many Library of Curse Knowledge projects are there?
Like a dozen.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Depending on how you count it, 6 or 7 projects that are on this feed, and that's not counting Breathing Space. So I've been involved in like 7 solid things that have been released in various amounts, and every single one of them, I will tell you that like, you learned stuff in that first in that first production, and you get better at it, and you fix mistakes and things like that. So I'm thinking about that. I don't know if that is even advice that I will be able to take for this stuff. Where like, could I make an entire season of stuff and then go back and make episode 1? I'm not entirely sure.
I mean, for this project, it's short form enough that you feasibly could, right? If you were going to record, and it sounds like you have in mind to do it with a fairly limited cast. So it's not like you're trying to schedule a big slew of actors and record these big numbers. So like you could, pardon me, you could record the entire thing and then either re-record or record for the first time this first episode if you wanted to, before you start releasing anything.
Well, and on this particular project, I have thought about really treating the first episode like a pilot, and fully producing an episode 1 before the rest of everything even gets. I would like to have it all written, before any of the rest of that gets cast or the other stuff. And then the idea being that like mini television pilots, once you have the full thing, you go back and you remake the first one as well as part of the full production.
Okay, interesting.
That's sort of in the back of my mind because I'm sort of thinking about doing a crowdfund raise to raise some money so I can pay people.
Oh wow, what a concept!
I would love. It's one of those things where I want to do this right, and I really want to do it well, and I kind of want to like, that's the thing that I've worked on enough hobby projects where nobody made any money that I'd kind of like to try doing a real version of it and see how that feels and how that works.
Sure,
and how much extra effort it is.
And you'll probably have to do some learning on that process too as you go along. Like, if you haven't done it before, but you have done, for sure, a significant number of successful long-running productions that you can put sort of on your little about me page on there. Like, hey, I know what I'm doing when it comes to making a podcast.
Yeah.
And I would like to pay someone to help me make a podcast.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel comfortable in working with people. One of the things I'm not sure about is, do I have enough of an audience to make crowdfunding a possibility? That's one of the questions I've never been able to get a straight answer on, is that like, I don't have a huge social media reach. If anybody out there knows somebody who knows about social media, about crowdfund, like if you've got one of the people that have done that, and I will be happy to talk to them. I will pay them for their services for consulting. If somebody knows somebody who can point me in that direction, because I'm interested in it. Even if it's just them to go, you've got like less than 1,000 followers on Twitter. You don't even bother. I would, if somebody tells me that is valuable information.
Yeah, then right?
Yeah, like I won't put my hopes on it. Yeah, so that's my thought, and I'm interested to hear from the audience about like the idea of doing all of that production and then going back.
Listeners, write in. We want to hear your thoughts about that.
Because like, I really think it could be beneficial, but man, that is a really rough thing to actually pull off, I bet.
Well, and I bet it would be so worth it if you actually did manage to record your first episode last in the production order. But the struggle of producing the entire rest of the show and then sitting on it while you have to go back and make the first one, that's a bummer.
But like, I mean, it's every single project I've worked on, man, the drop off on that episode 1 is huge. And so to imagine that that's the first time you've ever done anything, and maybe there's gradations of this kind of advice where maybe it's, you don't do it last, but you do it midway through the season,
fifth
like
or whatever.
You get a couple of other ones under your belt, do some other stuff, and then start working on episode 1. But yeah, it's something I've really been considering as both advice for other people and as things. Could I incorporate that for myself?
Well, this is not like related directly to these projects, but on Breathing Space, the episode that I wrote and directed this season, we ended up recording it almost completely in reverse order, where we started with the very last scene and worked backwards. And it wasn't because it was on purpose we did this. It was because that was how the scheduling happened and when people were available at the same time and whatnot. But like literally this morning, we recorded the first part of the first scene. And this was the last recording session. And we literally started with the final one. So it was like weird to kind of have to walk backwards through the story and through these characters' like development. That part I think is hard on the actors, having to like start at the end and have like a performance that conveys all of this development they haven't really gone through yet because we haven't recorded the other stuff. So I know they have to do that in TV productions where they just film everything out of order based on when they can get locations and stuff like that. But I don't know. It just seems more difficult for the actors to have to do all the mental gymnastics to like skip ahead or back in the character's like timeline. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The advantage on, and did you guys do a table read? Am I remembering that correctly?
We didn't get to do one because the scheduling was so wild. I had an actor who, bless her, she did an amazing job, but she works nights. And so her schedule was like totally reversed from everybody else's. And we had to like find slots where she would be awake to record with everyone. So we didn't get to do a table read.
And that's one of the things that makes stuff like television and movie productions work when they can do stuff out of order, is that they have gone in and done the work ahead of time. It's possible. Maybe I have a misapprehension. So professional productions have the luxury of they can actually get their people together and just like work it over and figure things out.
Like actually practice things.
Although I'm sure there are probably also productions and probably particular stars who are like, no, I'm not showing up for any of that. You have my stand-in read, and then I'm just going to show up for the day. I'm sure those people also exist.
Why would you not want the opportunity to practice? I'm always like kind of bummed and nervous if I don't have the opportunity to like read over stuff beforehand and say everything aloud and make sure I'm not going to trip or stumble or any of that. I am not I want to show up on the day and just do it for the first time type of person.
Yeah, I wouldn't either, but I'm sure those people exist.
Yeah.
The thing I can't that I'm still flummoxed by is I've worked on some productions where I just get a script in the an email with a script in it, and they're like, "Hey, here's the character I want you to do. Here's where you upload the Dropbox."
God.
And there's just no direction at all. There's nothing. I'm not talking to anyone about it at all. And so it's just and which on the one hand, that does show quite a good level of confidence that they have in my ability to. They're like, here you go.
Just
whatever
do
you
it.
turn in, I'm sure will be good. Which is great, and I'm sure for production reasons that's why they do it, and they produce good stuff. I've listened to the actual results, and they're all great.
Yeah.
But for me personally, that is such a different way from how I would approach it on my end. I want to be able to work with somebody else so that I can see what they're doing and talk to them about it and help craft it, because you never. I'm actually be interested to hear your experience directing after having been an actor for a couple of seasons.
Yeah.
Because have you done? I don't think you did theater or anything like that. This would be your first time directing for real.
So yeah, I've never done directing outside of Breathing Space.
Yeah.
I did a little bit of theater as like a child and a teenager, like actual physical theater, but never as a director. And it was really interesting because I feel like I'm just going to gas you up now. You did such a nice job directing me the first time I was on Breathing Space that I was like, oh, wow, I'm really absorbing a lot of useful directing information right now, even if that's sort of not the intent of these sessions.
Happy to, yeah.
But it was really helpful when I got to the point where I was directing episodes that I wrote to be like, okay, well, I saw how Scott did this or that, and it worked really well for me and got the performance that he was looking for. And I could tell where it was like appropriate or not appropriate to ask for more specific things from actors, and where it was reasonable to zero in on what I actually wanted, and where it was like, you know what, just do whatever feels natural and we'll let that ride. So I feel like, I was like really at the benefit of having seen a good and experienced director in action before I tried to do it myself.
I'm only laughing a little bit because it's the idea that I was experienced is hilarious, because it's like I had one season under my belt.
Yeah, that's way more episodes than I had under my belt, which was none, zero.
Yeah. No, dropping into directing on my end was really weird too. I wasn't expecting to do that, and then it just turned out that we needed people. Somebody needs to sit into the session, and we didn't have like dedicated people to do it.
Okay, so. I was gonna say, like, in the fourth season we're recording for Breathing Space, people have the option to be like, hey, if you're acting in the episode that you wrote and you don't want to direct and act at the same time, do you want to have a sit-in director, somebody else on the production team who can help you? And I don't think that existed at the beginning, did it?
It really didn't. I did have Ash sat in with me on the first session for Rat Among Falcons.
Okay.
Just to have somebody there. But that being said, I would have to go back and check. I'm not going to go back and check, but my memory is that I was still doing a lot of the directing at that time. I was just mostly had somebody else there with me. I wish I'd leaned on that more as I was doing stuff where I was performing. The kind of whenever you see a MASH episode that was written, directed, and stars Alan Alda, I'm always like, dude, you probably could have passed off one of those jobs to somebody else.
Three hats, one on top of another for this one, maybe.
But that being said, the difference between, it's also a matter of like what you're doing in those scenarios. Like, for example, I just recorded with Vic the other day, and it was just me and Vic. Technically, I'm directing, but like I know Vic well enough that like, A, I'm not going to have to watch him that closely, and B, I also know that he'll call me out when he's going to give me back feedback that I know and I can trust.
Right.
So like the fact that I didn't have somebody else there with me, not a big deal in that case. But I can think back to some productions where I had, it was me directing and performing in it, and also I had like 5 people who I hadn't worked with before, and I'm like, I probably should have had somebody in those cases.
It would have just made your life easier to have somebody backing you up there.
And in most of those cases, I have the luxury of because I was also editing those things. My time is free, and so if I noticed in the edit, that line wasn't a good line read from Scott. Well, luckily the voice actor was right there.
I'm Scott. I can just re-record it right now.
Exactly. But yeah. So it's been interesting developing that skill set. It was not something I was ever interested in doing. I now find I quite enjoy working with actors and trying to get the performances out of them. And I've gotten good feedback, which makes me feel like I'm doing a good job.
I can tell you're doing a good job.
Finding the right language. Finding the right language to tell people, to get the like what you want out of somebody is so interesting. Because I remember I was doing a really bad job of it when I first started.
It's a skill you have to practice.
Well, yeah, but like I kept saying things like, I want you to be like 20% more angry. And then they're like, that's like, patently, that is a terrible thing to tell an actor, because it's like, yeah. And it's just about being specific in my cases, where it's like, okay, here's the word I need you to emphasize. Here's the cadence, but I will give them the line read and stuff like that, which is super helpful. Seems to be what gets me the best results from my actors. I'm sure there are people who would really rankle against my style. But...
Well, and it's been interesting having I feel like we have spun way off of the actual like projects we're talking about on this podcast, but making audio dramas in general. It's been very interesting to be directed by a couple of different people now on Breathing Space, because everyone's direction styles are very different. Like Ash is so hands off. He will have us read it through once, read it through a second time, be like, great. Or like maybe he'll give one note between. He doesn't ever stop us between takes. Like he'll wait till we get all the way to the end of the section to give a note and have us like take a line again. But you and I, and because I learned off of you, I think this is probably why we both do this, but I will do a straight read through with all the actors saying all the lines and we don't stop for any reason. And unless someone has like a bad stumble or whatever and they want to take it again, but we'll go all the way to the end of the scene and then we'll go through line by line and get clean takes of everything. And I will be like super granular and nitpicky about every single thing. And I will sometimes have an actor do a line like 4 or 5 times if they're like, not giving me the whatever it is that I want them to give me. But I'm sure that would be super annoying for a lot of people, but my actors have been very, very kind about it overall. But
yeah, it's one of those things where I do a little bit more of a mix now, at least this season. I've been do it, again, the first is one, the table read, where you're just kind of reading it through. Second time, maybe some notes. And then the third time is usually when I go back in and I have to make sure we get it on that third one.
Yeah, but you have to have at least one clean take that the editor can use and not have to stitch stuff together.
And the reason why I do the break, I make them get it right in the actual scene is mostly because editing, where I'm like, oh, if I put takes at the end of like if I have us go back and redo lines at the end of a take, editor version of me doesn't remember that. And I then, as I'm listening through, I'm editing, and then I'm like, oh wait, here's like the actual
there's
takes
extra
here. Now I gotta
material here I didn't remember that was stapled on to the end. Yeah.
So it's just a matter of like, it's also directorial style, but it's also a matter of like, oh, editor me knows that that's going to have to be there. It has to be right there. Otherwise I will not remember.
Your brain will be like, well, this is all there is. Oh wait, there's extra shit that we forgot about. Yeah.
It's definitely interesting being experienced both work. I haven't done anything where I wrote it and then didn't edit it. I've always edited my own stuff, but I have edited people's other episodes that I didn't write. And so the difference between like being handed, here's a bunch of audio that you weren't there for the recording of, here, just make it work, versus like stuff that I was there through the whole way through, is really interesting as well.
Yeah.
I found that, like, at least, and this is just my own bugaboo, I stopped writing any kind of like description of like the sounds that were going to be in any of my scripts, because I realized that by the time that I got around to it, I wasn't reading my own notes, because I also wasn't reading the other director's notes. I was just putting in what sounded right to me.
It's like, this is we're going vibes based on this one. We're just gonna vibe through it.
Whatever. If it's important, I'm sure that they'll point out that I should have put that noise there, but otherwise I'm just going to go for it.
Well, I think there were like, 1 or 2 places in the material that you edited for me that I wrote where I was like, oh, can I get XYZ type of noise in this spot? Like I need a banging, clanging noise here or whatever. And you're like, oh yeah, I have perfect banging and clanging noises ready to go.
Since we're just talking general stuff now, possibly my favorite part of all audio drama production is the moment when I get to act sounds along live with audio. Like, most of the time you're like collecting them from sound libraries or other other things. But sometimes I literally like I put the rough cut audio on a MP3 player with my phone or whatever, and I have my headphones on, and then I have my field recorder, and I'm in my garage like as the scene is playing, banging in time on my garage door with a big old stick to get the right bangs and stuff.
It's so good. And then later it sounds incredible. It's like it's perfect because Scott used the like click track basically to bang on his garage door.
The funniest version of that was we had a character he's got cybernetic wheels instead of legs, and so I have my electric lawnmower up on cinder blocks in our garage.
Oh my God.
And every time the character's supposed to move, I'm just like
I love that.
That kind of thing is so much fun.
That's a joy and a delight. And like we are listeners, we're so lucky to have Scott on Breathing Space because he does the absolute most when it comes to getting the right types of sounds for whatever type of sound design we need. Like he is out here in the field with that field recorder banging and clanging and running his lawnmower.
Yeah, I've cooked actual food for food making sounds
and eaten actual food.
Yep. Yeah. for authentic mouth noises. It's fun. I enjoy that part. The part that I don't like is when I'm just like pouring through 500 different sound libraries trying to find the electricity noise that isn't realistic. It's the one that people think it sounds like instead.
Yeah. What the zapping noise that like
that noise, which isn't how electricity actually sounds, but it's the thing that we need because
the Tesla coil sound, right?
Yeah.
That's so funny.
It's actually a Jacob's ladder. If anybody else is out there looking for the electricity sound, the thing to look for is a Jacob's ladder. Yeah. It's the one that has the two sticks and you see the electricity going up it. We'll be like,
oh, sure.
That's the noise.
Okay.
Apparently that's what movies have trained us to think the electricity sounds like, even though that's
so funny. I'm learning things about sound design today.
Okay, well, so we've definitely had a lovely, wide-ranging conversation to make up for the fact that we didn't actually have anything. Well, we had a couple of little things to talk about, but so yeah, we'll convene back in a couple of weeks. Do you have something that you want to commit to being on your to-do list?
So my homework remains the same, which is like fill through the outline for the second half of the As in West pilot. I need to get that outline from Sam, and I know Sam was super busy in the past week. So whenever that gets done, then I can do my part of the homework, but I'm not super stressed about it. Again, it's the holidays. It's gonna be what it is. Yeah.
I'm gonna dive back into writing scripts and see if I can get it. I will continue to write words. Hopefully they will be words that I can keep.
One of these times you'll write words and be like, oh, I like these ones. Let's use these.
I liked the other ones. It's just they weren't going in the direction I needed them to go.
Well, literally, sometimes you have to write through the whole like conclusion of a possible path to get to the end and be like, this is not where I wanted to go. Oh, and now I know that.
The number of times that I've taken a 2,000, 3,000 word draft and just been like, trash. Well, not trash. Always save your drafts.
Save your drafts always, because there's sometimes stuff you can like pillage from them later on.
Exactly. Go back in and copy paste out of them. Yeah. All right. Well, in that case, we will catch y'all audience members in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Have a good holiday, everybody.
All right. Thank you for joining us for Behind the Locked Doors, a library of cursed knowledge production podcast thing. I don't know. If you are interested in any of these projects, you can head over to library.horse, which will eventually redirect to a webpage once I make it, If you want to support the podcast, we do have a Patreon. It's patreon.com/cursed knowledge. See y'all next week. No, wait. See y'all in 2 weeks.